When a soul is selected to be sent down into the world and to be born into a new baby, before the soul comes down to this world, the soul makes an oath. And the oath goes like this: I will be a tzaddik. I'll be a righteous, pious, perfect person. And I will not be a rasha, a wicked, a sinner, a failure of a person. However, even if the whole world will sing my praises and refer to me as a tzaddik, as a righteous person, I will always consider myself as the rasha, the sinner, the wicked, the failure. That's the oath that a soul makes, your soul, my soul, before we came down into this world. There's a number of questions. We need to understand this oath. First of all, what's the double expression? If I'm going to be the righteous person, of course I'm not going to be the wicked, the sinner. Why the double expression? Number two, how reasonable is this oath? Can everybody say they're fulfilling this oath and living a life of absolute perfection? So, are we ever fulfilling this oath? Third of all, this seems to be in clear contradiction to another teaching in the Mishnah, where the teaching says that a person should never consider themselves as a rasha, as a wicked, as a sinner, as a failure of a person. That's a very unhealthy practice. Yet in this oath, we're being told you should always consider yourself that way. And finally, what is the benefit of such an oath, of such a perspective? Because we know, we have a principle that a person has to always be in a state of simcha, of joy, of happiness. A person has to always worship God in a state of simcha. But if a person always has to consider about themselves that they are the failure, the sinner, how's it possible to be in a state of joy? This would cause unbelievable depression and frustration in life. Or on the flip side, if this thought about you being the sinner doesn't cause you frustration or depression, that probably means you've given up and you don't care anymore. And so you'll become apathetic to all of the life of living good and just and correct. So then what point is there in making this oath? It's a difficult passage of the Talmud to understand. So to understand this, the Alter Rebbe introduces and tells us that the Talmud tells us there are 5 classifications about spiritual personas. They are, we have the 3 general classifications: the tzaddik, the righteous, pious, perfect person; on the other extreme, the rasha, the wicked sinner; and then the beinoni. The beinoni is the middle person, the in-betweener. He's not completely perfect and not completely imperfect. He's somewhere in between. Then we have 2 subcategories. So the tzaddik, there's the tzaddik v'tov lo, the tzaddik and there is good to him or good in him. The tzaddik v'ra lo, the tzaddik there is bad in him or to him. The rasha, also 2 classifications. The rasha, there is good in him or to him. The rasha, that there is bad in him or to him. And then in the middle again is the beinoni, the in-between kind of person. What are these 5 classifications of spiritual personalities? What does it mean, the tzaddik that has good or bad, the rasha that has good or bad? So the Talmud explains that it means as follows. We're going to study a number of explanations. The Talmud says the tzaddik v'tov lo means the tzaddik who has it good in life, lives a life of good fortune. The tzaddik v'ra lo means the tzaddik who has it bad in life, all kinds of suffering in life. Why would one tzaddik live the good life and one the bad life? So it refers to 2 different kinds of tzaddikim, of righteous people. One is the tzaddik gamur, the completely perfect person, and one is the tzaddik she'eno gamur, the tzaddik who's not completely perfect. He's not 100%, but he's 99 or 99.9% perfect. That's the explanation of the Talmud. The Zohar says something a little different. The Zohar says the expression of tzaddik v'tovlo, the tzaddik, it's good to him or it's bad to him, is not a description about their lot in life, but a description about the nature of the holiness of their soul. Tzaddik v'tovlo means the tzaddik v'tovlo, who's 100% good. There only exists goodness and piety in his life or her life. Tzaddik v'ralo is the tzaddik who has a little bit of bad. Like we said before, a bit of an incomplete tzaddik. V'ra, there is some bad still, some traces of bad still in him or her. However, lo, it is subservient to him, meaning that that tiny trace of bad is completely nullified to the greatness of his holiness. The same would be for the Rasha. The Rasha V'tovlo, the Rasha V'tov means the Rasha who has a little bit of good still in them, as wicked as they are. And the Rasha V'ralo means the Rasha who has completely, is a complete sinner, is completely imperfect and incomplete. So then, why the need for two different kinds of classifications? You have the tzaddik v'tovlo, the tzaddik who is completely good, and then you have tzaddik gamor, the complete tzaddik. They sound like the same thing. Tzaddik v'ralo, the tzaddik who has a little bit of bad, and then tzaddik she'eno gamor, the incomplete tzaddik. Again, sounds like the same thing. Why the need for these double expressions? Next, the Talmud in Brachot has another way of explaining the difference of these three kinds of people: the tzaddik, the rasha, and the beinoni. And the Talmud says every person has two inclinations within, two voices, the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Tov is the good inclination, always moving a person, pushing a person to do that which is good. The Yetzer Hara is the inclination with the person, always pushing a person to do that which is wrong, that which is unhealthy for them. So it's a battlefield within every person. In the life of the tzaddik, where we have these two voices, it's always the Yetzer Tov that wins, and the voice of goodness always prevails. In the Rasha, it's always the Yetzer Hara, it's always the evil inclination which prevails. And in the Beinoni, in the in-between kind of person, it's nishtahin or nishtaher, meaning it's sometimes the Yetzer Tov will win, sometimes the Yetzer Hara will win. It's somebody who doesn't have a consistency in life. It's a bit of this and a bit of that. Let's go further. Let's try to explore these personalities. There was once a great sage, Rabbah, in the third century, and he was teaching his students, and he said, you want to know what the Beinoni, what the kind of in-between person is? Ana, look at me. I am the Beinoni. Now, his student or his colleague, Abaye, turns to him and says, Rabbah, you're the Beinoni. You're the mediocre kind of person. We know who you are. You are a great, holy, righteous sage. You're somebody that not for a moment in your life do you stop studying Torah. You are always immersed in holiness, in good deeds. How can you say you're a Beinoni? If you're the Beinoni, then we're all much lower than you are. So we're all Risha'im, we're all the wicked, we're all the sinners. And the expression he uses is, you've left no life in us. You've proclaimed us to be somewhat dead. There's a kind of expression over here that the Rasha, the wicked person, even when they're alive, they're really like they're dead. So if we're all not the Beinoni, we're all the Rasha, it's like we're spiritually dead people. How can you claim this about yourself and about us? Next question. Iyov, the prophet Job, once turned to God and complained. And he said, God, how can you reward the righteous and punish the wicked? You created us in the way that we are. You created some people who are destined, who are prone to be righteous. You created some people who are destined and prone to be wicked. So this person who behaves righteously or wickedly is not doing it out of their own choice or volition, but it's because the way you created them. So how can you reward or punish any person? Now, we need to understand what Eve is telling us, because we have a principle that says that it's true that God creates us in a certain way. Right? God creates some people to be tall, some people to be short, some people brown hair, blonde hair, blue eyes, brown eyes, a certain level of IQ. All of these parts of our persona are decided by God. Science would say it's decided by the genetics, and the Talmud says it's designed by God, which is really a very similar concept, just different languages. But when it comes to the choices we make, whether we choose to do the right thing or choose to do the wrong thing, that is not designed or forced by God. That's a choice that we make. How can Iyov be telling God that some people are destined to be righteous or destined to be wicked? Those are things that we make choices about in life, which is why the one who makes good choices is deserving of reward. The one who makes poor choices is deserving of punishment. Next, the Alter Rebbe says, we need to get a little deeper and understand what is the nature of the Beinoni, this middle kind of person, not the complete righteous and not the complete wicked. It cannot mean, as we might assume, that it's a person who is half-half. He has 50% good deeds and 50% bad deeds. Because remember, Rabbah, the great sage, said about himself, he's the Beinoni. Now, he wasn't a liar. He wasn't a dishonest person. He was fully aware of who he was. And at the same time, he was a completely righteous person, immersed in Torah study and good deeds a whole day. So therefore, if he's clearly saying about himself, here's this Benini, this middle kind of spiritual persona, we need to figure out exactly what is the nature, what's the essence of this Benoni. Furthermore, we don't really describe people or judge people based on their overall performance in life. We treat every single person in the moment. What's important to me or to us right now is not how we've been throughout our life, but how we are right now. So if you look at it that way, right now, if I'm engaged in a sin, in a bad decision, then I'm a rasha. I'm a wicked person for the moment. I'm a failure. I've done something wrong. If I've done teshuvah and I've repaired that sin and I do something righteous right now, then right now I'm the tzaddik. Right now I'm a righteous, holy, pious person making good choices. Now, becoming this rasha, becoming this failure could be any kind of sin that a person performs in the moment, even if it's a very minor sin, even if it's not a law from the Torah, from God, but a law just of the rabbis, even if it's the rabbi said that you have to study Torah in any spare moment that you have, which is a hard mitzvah to fulfill. Who fulfills that? Who uses every spare 5 minutes to do something good and study Torah? Which means nobody really is ever 100% perfect, it would seem. Everyone is, for some moments, becoming this rasha, becoming this sinner. And then if they're doing teshuvah, they're repairing that, then they're becoming the tzaddik, the righteous person. So when is anyone ever the Benoni? When can we classify a moment in your life when you're the Benoni, the in-betweener? You're either doing something wrong or you're doing something right. That's the conclusion of today's portion of Tanya. So what have we've been introduced to different classifications of spiritual personas as it comes from the Talmud and also in Kabbalah. We know that there are some souls that are called the righteous ones, some souls based on their decisions are called the wicked, the imperfect ones. We know that there's an in-betweener, but we don't understand the true nature of what these classifications are. And we're getting a little confused here. Who's this Benoni? Now, the reason why the Benoni is very important, and we're going to be studying this more, is because the book of the Tanya was actually written to describe the Benoni. It's a Sefer Shel Benonim. It's not a book for the absolute righteous. There's a different book for you kinds of people. It's not a book for those that have given up in life and are the complete rasha. It's a book for the people who are striving to be the best they can, the Benoni. What is the nature of this Benoni, of this middle intermediary kind of person? So we've been also introduced to many questions over here, trying to explore the meaning of the teachings of our sages. And as the Tanya will unfold, we'll be able to unravel the various definitions of these descriptions and have a greater appreciation for what they mean and what can we become in life. Have a great day and make it a very special one.